If you've been a writer for any length of time, my guess is that you have heard the words writing process at least once or twice. And yes, I totally get it because I've been there. Definitely a confusing thing, especially when people tell you, oh, this is the right way to do it. You do not edit while you're drafting. Don't do that. And then other people are like, no, absolutely edit while you're drafting. So that way you have already finished your editing by the time you are done with your drafting stage as well. And then yet other people are like, that's inconsequential because you should be plotting even before you start writing your draft. And then other people are like, no, this is completely a stint of your growth as a writer. You should absolutely just write, get to your keyboard, write whatever comes to your mind, write as much as you can, and then you'll figure it out later. And you're just left wondering, what's the right way to write a book? I just want to get words on a page and see it in print. That was all I wanted in the first place. I did not sign up for this complicated mess. And if you are in that place, friend, I completely understand because I was there too. And that's actually what today's episode is going to be dealing with and talking about, among other things, which I'm super excited for you to listen to. But definitely tune in to this episode if you've ever wondered any of these questions, because we're going to be talking about just that. Hey friend, do you love the smell of books? Maybe you absolutely delight in the sound of a pen gliding across a page as you write. Hi, my name is Shira Rodriguez, and I am a Jesus follower, a writer, entrepreneur, and lover of all things boho and books. In this podcast, I want to take you on a journey of discovering yourself, discovering God and your passions, and how to make your life beautiful and so full that it overflows into the lives of others. And over here, we are not about compartmentalizing life. Oh no. Over here, we talk about holistically taking your life and presenting it as a place where others can be blessed just by knowing you. Are you excited? I am. So snag your favorite mug of tea or a pen and paper and let's jump in. Because you're listening to Her Reading Life podcast. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Her Reading Life podcast. I am so thrilled to have you on here. Honestly, if this is your first time on the podcast, welcome. I'm so thrilled that you are here. Please consider this your personal invite to just settle down with a hot mug of coffee or tea, whatever is your taste, and just imagine that we're across the table in my kitchen or at a coffee shop, just chatting away like old friends, and that you're able to just eavesdrop on all the conversations that I have on this podcast. I really love creating a beautiful, safe space for you to feel welcomed and warmed and feel like you are part of a writing community. Writing can feel like such a isolated process, such a solitary journey kind of thing, and we're often told that we have to be lone wolves, but I don't think that's actually true. In fact, some of the best writers, I'm not going to rant on this, but some of the best writers of the past actually formed communities. You had Virginia Woolf and her Bloomsburg group. Don't quote me on this because I don't exactly remember. It's been a little while. But you also had Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, and all the poets who surrounded her, like Lord Byron and Percy Shelley? I don't remember. But all the group of the poets who surrounded that. You also had Dickens and his group that he had. C.S. Lewis and the Inklings and Tolkien. Like, how can we forget that? So obviously, the writing journey is not meant to be isolated nor lonely. And that's why I created this place, so that you can be invited and feel like you are part of one of these groups and you're eavesdropping on these conversations. Well, today I am so thrilled because we are going to be diving into this really important question of what is your writing process? How do you find your personal writing process? And yes, there are ways to find something that really works for you and that is uniquely tailored to you. And we're going to be talking all about that. Now, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I highly encourage you to do so. My guest, Jake Lynch, shared his story on writing, and truly it is incredible. You need to listen to this. If you have not listened to it, definitely listen to it. We talked all about how to know if you are called to be a writer and whether writing is a calling. Like, whether it's something that you can actually pursue as a career, and how to know if it's the career for you and the calling that God has on your life for you. And so it was so amazing to be able to chat together. And then today, we are going to be chatting all about the writing process, but also habits that you can implement, how you can embrace the writing process and really apply it not just to yourself, but also to life through the writing process. So I am so absolutely thrilled to be able to share this episode with you. It was so fun to listen to this again. It was funny. It was sweet. I loved it so, so much. So I can't wait for you to hear it. So without further ado, let's jump in. And another thing that I love that you mentioned was how okay, oh yes, that you inserted like a lot of your life experience
Yes.
into your story and were able to bring your own story into a fictional story, your own self into a character that maybe is completely different from you. Like
Yeah.
you like Crystal isn't exactly you, but you were able to bring much of yourself into the story. And
Yes.
even though you're not a girl and you're
No, I'm
not
not.
and you're not a teenage high school teenager, you were never a teenage high school like girl, you're able to bring your own experience into that story, and we're able to make it a true story by bringing your own experience in.
Yeah. Yeah. And every writer, whether they realize it or not, we do put bits of ourself into our story. We write what
Absolutely.
we know. And, like I put it like writing this kind of story, writing Crystal's story, I did take a lot of elements for myself. Not 100%, like you said, but there are a lot of similarities between us. And it is putting yourself out there. That's another risk of writing a book is that you put yourself out there a little bit. You like write your emotions onto the page and you put it out there for people to, either criticize or approve. And
Mhm.
there's a fear factor to that as well. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm writing this for God and for other people. I'm like, if you don't like it, then you don't like it. You should read something else. That's why I say in the beginning of the book, like, this book isn't really for everyone. It's like if you relate to these issues, then this book is for you. But if it's not, like if it doesn't relate to you, then like, go do something else. Like this book is not really oh, I want to have a nice entertaining read and go to La La Land. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna take you to sad, sad land so you can question so you can learn about life.
Exactly. Exactly, yes. And yeah, definitely, I think the best writing will always come from the deepest part of you. I love this quote
Yeah.
from Ernest Hemingway where he's like, "Just write the truest sentence you know." And I will be honest, that helps me so much. At first, I didn't understand. I was like, "What on earth do you want me? You want me to write nonfiction? Because this story ain't like realistic, if that's what you mean." But then I realized that it's about like just writing something that's authentic, something that you're like, yes, I can honestly say this is a true sentence, just right from the deepest part of you, of who
Yeah.
you are, because that is where our best writing comes from. And I feel like people don't talk about this enough, that your experience will often bring exactly what you need to the table. In fact, people can write, let's say, retelling, okay? Like those fairy tale retellings. There are so many ways that people can write a retelling of, I don't know, Sleeping Beauty, okay? Uh, Give it to 4 people, those 4 people are going to write it completely differently because
Yeah.
each one has a completely different background, a completely different experience, completely different personalities, tastes, and that's all beautiful, and they'll all be writing a different story, but that's the point. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of writing and writing something unique. So I feel like people often worry about writing something that's unique or writing that's something good. Just write something true to you and to your experience, and it'll all take care of itself. Just write something that you would be like, "Okay, God, I think you made me to do this," or it's something that just genuinely, if nothing else, something that genuinely gives you joy to read it, and you're like, "I would have loved to read this."
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful going down that kind of path and discovering how you write as a person because, someone else may have written this same kind of story, but they haven't read your story and what you
Mhm.
can write in a sense. Because, like you said, we're all different and unique, and God makes us all unique. Even twins aren't 100% the same, they
Yeah.
still go through different experiences. And you're everything you said is 100% true, Shira. So preach it, prophet.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
welcome.
I remember yeah, I remember listening to your previous podcast where you were on with Dan Kenner, and which, by the way, I enjoyed immensely.
Thank you.
And I love how you shared how you once met a janitor who surprised you with how kind and amiable he was and just such a gentleman. I loved hearing that story. And I would love to hear how you learned to pivot and be flexible because the initial idea, the initial inspiration that you had is at least slightly different from what the end product and how it
Yeah.
eventually panned out into the novel and the way the storyline works in the novel, and even who the protagonist is in the novel.
Yes.
Um, I would love to hear how you learned to be flexible with your own story because it truly is essential as a storyteller and as an artist to be flexible.
Yes.
How did you learn to pivot and change, and how did you make yourself aware when something wasn't exactly working and required change?
Yeah. So with me starting this project of writing this book, take into account this book took me 5 years to write,
Yeah.
and that is a long time. So one of the ways that I gauged myself and the horrible part about it is that it took a long time for me to realize what wasn't working and what
Right.
was working. And I had to go through the ropes to see which technique would work for me because the hard part about writing is that no one can tell you how you can write. Only you can
Yeah.
figure that out because people write differently. And so I had to go through that through trial and error. So one of the ways that I pivoted was every year I would check myself and be, okay, how much progress have I made this year? And am I making real progress, essentially?
Yeah.
And so I went through a lot of different ways actually to try out how I personally would write books. People say you're either a pantser or you're a plotter. And what
Mhm.
I learned is I'm actually a hybrid of the both. I'm a little bit of both,
Best
but
of
I
both worlds.
lean more towards pantser, but I still have to plot some of my story in order to go there. So every year I would try something different. I first started writing and editing at the same time for a full year, and you're already giving me that look. It's like it's a look of pain. You're like, that is the
It
one
is.
thing you should never do as a writer. Okay, like for all you people listening out there, do not write and edit your story at the same time. For practical advice, write the story first and edit it later. I know you don't want to and you feel tempted to edit it. Do not touch it until later, please. And so I would write and edit it for a full year. I wrote one chapter for a whole year and I didn't get anywhere. And so then I switched gears. The next year, I decided, okay, I'm just gonna plot everything. So I took a notebook and I started writing out everything that would happen. And that's actually where I created the main character, Crystal. I wrote
Mm.
her down and everything. But then as I was writing, like plotting it all down, I didn't get anywhere with the story because the story wasn't being written. And so I did that for a whole year. And then the next year, I did the opposite. I started plotting it with no goal in mind. And I got lost as I was doing that. And so, year after year, you get a little frustrated. And then I'm like, okay, I need to read some books on how to write books. And so that's when I learned about how pantsers and plotters, how to write books and everything. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm going to try a hybrid approach. I'm going to plot a little bit of it, but then I'm going to free create in the interims between the points. And that's when I started learning I was making more progress with it. So I had to go through trial and error to figure out how I write. Of course, I hope it doesn't take other people 5 years to learn how to write a book, but I have listened to podcasts where people have taken 5, 6, 8 years, but it shouldn't take that long originally. So please learn from my mistakes. But eventually, as I kept trying new things, trial and error, I eventually learned how I personally write stories. And it took a long time, but I eventually got there. It's discouraging at times, but I stuck with it and I kept going and I kept trying. And I eventually was able to publish my first book.
Yay. That's awesome. That's amazing. And I
That was a
honestly,
good
I think
question.
that yeah, that was a good answer. Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, I just think it's so incredible that you were able to, plug away at it for 5 years and that you didn't give up even though let's just be honest, especially at that point when you've been either writing 1 chapter for a full year
Oh my
or
gosh.
that you've been outlining for a full year and you're like, "Do I really have anything to show for it besides bullet points?"
Yeah,
And yeah, and yet you kept going, and today you have a published book, which is amazing.
I know. I felt very discouraged a lot during those first few years because at that time I was not finding any joy in doing this. It took
Of
me until
course.
like a couple years later that I started to like it, but I was feeling a lot of discouragement because I didn't know what I was doing. And
Mhm.
there are times when I don't always know what I'm doing when I'm writing a story, but one of the biggest motivators that kind of kept me going forward was that I knew that God was going to use this to help impact someone in a positive
Mhm.
way. And then, but also, I had this kind of dilemma I was going through because I knew that God had called me to do something. He had called me to do this. He called me to write a book, but, I could have, like put it down and not done it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I was kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place because I'm like, I can either choose not to do what God called me to do, and I know that I will be unhappy like
Mhm.
not doing what God called me to do, and that would always haunt me a little bit. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's always gonna be on my mind, and that'll drive me crazy. Or I can, trudge on forward and keep writing the story, even though I don't fully know what I'm doing with it. I'm still learning how to do it. And so I grit my teeth and I kept trudging forward, and eventually I was able to climb the mountain and make it to the top.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you also mentioned how everybody has a different writing style. Like
Yes.
the process, not just the writing style, not just the characters, but your creative process is going to
Yeah.
be completely different. And we so often look on YouTube or like how to write a book. And yes, there are like some techniques that you can absolutely use, but just like the actual writing style where you can't just say, okay, I will follow step 1, 2, 3, and there's my writing style. No, it takes practice, it takes time. So also your writing habits, your writing routine, your writing process is going to be different depending on who you are, what morning habits work for you, what night habits work for you, like what your
Yeah.
life looks like. And even I think in different seasons of life, it's going to be different. You know, when you're young, it's going to look one way. When you're older, it's going to look another way. And then when you're still older, it's going to look a completely different way. It's just, it's really about learning to recognize what works for you, knowing yourself well enough, and I think also, like, working on yourself first before even trying to trying to be like, "Oh, I've got everything together." No, we're always
Yeah.
consistently learning, and just being able to be receptive to the way that you work and fine-tuning your ability to perceive, "Okay, this is working. This is not
Yeah.
working." Being
Yeah.
willing to recognize that because sometimes it can be hard to recognize, especially if we're like, "No, I'm doing it right. I'm doing it right. Don't tell me what to do." Just having that humility and that receptiveness to be able to tell when something's working and when it's not. And you will learn. We all do at some point, but just being willing even to make mistakes and things like that.
Yeah. You're 100% right. And it sometimes you have to go through trial and error to discover how you personally write, what your writing process is. And you can't like always put a formula to it. I
Yeah.
liked math in high school. It's like 2 plus 2 equals 4. That makes sense. In English class, it's like, we're like, what do you like, how do you feel this person is biased or whatever? Or write about
Yeah.
your feelings today. And I'm like, what? Like, how do you do that? You can't always put a formula in writing. And sometimes you have to find out that writing is subjective a little bit and you write a little differently than other people.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Actually, in light of this, how are you approaching drafting your newest works in progress, now that you've published your first novel and gone through this whole process of working on the first novel? How is this process for your books that you're working on now, similar or different?
Yeah, so there's a little more structure to it now that I've learned how to write a book, essentially, or
Mhm,
how I write books. So one of the ways that I do it is I have a draft system. So I start off like with the way that I write is I don't fully know my story until after I've written it. And so, I'll plot some of it and then I'll free write it. And then once it's done being written, like I create it first. Like the first draft is the creation draft. And
mhm,
then the second draft, I'll read through it and I'll leave a bunch of comments on a Word document of things that I need to change or things to leave the same. And then I'll, leave the comments and then I'll go through it again, read through it, start making those changes based off the comments, and then go through another draft just to finalize it, trim it down. And then I'll send it to an editor, work on it with them back and forth, and then come back and maybe do a final read through
mhm.
and then make sure there's no more spelling errors or plot holes, and then it usually is done around then. So it's a lot of reading, especially
Yeah,
reading my own work.
yeah.
Luckily, I have the time to do that right now. But yeah, it's like a lot of reading and editing. Editing is most of the process.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that you were able to kind of refine it now, and yeah, I think that so many times we have to have a little patience with ourselves, especially in the drafting process, where it's
Yes.
not gonna be perfect, it's going to be an ugly little version of of the
Oh yeah.
of the final project, of the final product, and, I know there were some other writers, I forgot who, they were saying, like, that the first draft was not not at all what the eventual final product
Oh
is.
yeah.
And it's like the writer is just dumping. Oh, yeah, somebody said, I can't remember who, but they were saying how the draft is the writer telling themselves the story, the
Yeah.
first
That
draft, and
just
then the revision is, like, you just cleaning up and making it ready for everybody else, but it's just the raw structure, and there's gonna be problems in it and things like that, but again, I love that idea of, keeping a document of like, "Okay, I need to fix this, I need to fix this, I need to do that." And yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's it's a long process, and that's one of the things that we learn through trial and error as writers is that writing a book takes a long time.
Mhm.
Like I've learned to start planning more from a longer term perspective. Like, okay, like
Mhm.
9 months down the line, I would like to have my book done or the story written by that
Mhm.
point. And like that's how you build a book. You build it one brick at a time, and eventually you've got a house.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I would love to hear if you could go back and tell your younger self one piece of advice, just one,
just
what
one.
would it be?
It would be do not write and edit at the same time. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I wish I had learned that sooner. And then do your homework on how to write a book because it helps a little bit on, what you're getting into. But
right.
do not write and edit at the same time, dude. Would have
Yeah.
saved you a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's so true. I feel like also editing and writing at the same time. I mean, I guess like what I like to do is I do send it to my dad and my sister sometimes to kind of read through, okay, is this working? Is it not? Because I need a couple things
Yeah,
maybe for future plots things. I'm like, let me just make sure the character's making sense, for example, so that in the future chapters that I'm already on, it kind of will make sense, and anything that I need
yeah,
to add to the character so that that way I just make sure I have that. But if you're going back and editing, it kind of does set you on this perfectionist kind of
oh my gosh.
lens, because in editing, you're literally trying to find all the mistakes in your
You
work.
f-
And so all those mistakes just really eat away at your confidence, which you
Yeah.
need to draft the book. You kind of have to be slightly blindly optimistic when you're drafting
Yeah.
because exactly.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
um, often the editing will set you on this perfectionism, which is exactly what keeps us as writers, even in the drafting stage, sometimes that perfectionism keeps us from advancing. So, I feel like often if we just focus on putting words on the page in the drafting process, that will take care of itself because we can fix all the mistakes later. Thankfully, I forgot who said this. I'm really forgetting everybody that said anything that I've ever heard for some reason today. But I remember that somebody was saying that, oh, in writing, you honestly get to be really lucky because you can do over things. In
Yeah.
painting, it can be a little bit harder to do over things. It's a little bit more work. If you're acting on a stage in theater, it's a little bit more work. Even in film, resetting the scene is money and time, which
What?
equals money. It's but exactly. Yeah, but with writing, it's just a backspace away. You just have to delete the words and do that. So, yeah, I feel like honestly, the best thing is just to just write those words, even if they're imperfect, but get words on the page and leave the editing and the perfectionism for later. Did you know there was a time when I spent 2 full years working and reworking my novel's first 5 chapters? That was before I became older and hopefully wiser and decided that was definitely not the way to go. I've learned a good many lessons since then, but one of them is to be okay with mistakes. The fact that my book will never be perfect, and that's okay. In fact, it kind of makes it beautiful. Life is like that too. Sometimes we think that the things that make us imperfect or broken are the things that make us unwanted or even ugly, too broken to be patched up. And that's why I'm so glad that someone wrote a book about this. So, friend, if you've ever felt lost or hopeless, if you've ever been in a place, maybe right now, where you're trying to find a reason to breathe, this story is for you. It's about a girl named Crystal who struggles with suicide, depression, and finding hope in life. So, dear listener, if hope feels like a long lost treasure for you, I think I might have found your book. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, I think you'll love it because it's written by our very own guest, Jake Lynch. His book, Broken to Beautiful, is now available on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and recently released in audiobook format, which is amazing because I'm a huge audiobook person and I got to listen to a little, and the narrator is truly wonderful. Don't take my word for it, though. If you'd like to listen or read for yourself, head over right now by popping onto Amazon or using the links in the show notes below. Hey there, lovely listeners. I have the most fantastic opportunity to share with you today. How would you like to join the street team for Novelists in November short story collection featuring my very own short story, which you'll be the first to discover the title and story blurb if you join? This enchanting anthology is launching this November, and I'd be absolutely delighted to have you join us. Picture this: dark academia vibes, cozy sweaters, rain pattering on your window, and all your favorite bookish feels with a mug of hot tea or pumpkin latte. That's the essence of this collection. By joining our street team, you'll get exclusive behind-the-scenes info, early access to the cover, sneak peeks of the stories, first dibs on pre-orders, and some very special gifts I'm personally designing just for you. And the best part? There are no requirements. It's super flexible to fit your schedule. We're planning an exciting cover reveal in June and story and title reveal earlier in the month. Plus, you'll get an early ebook copy of the anthology and see our book cover before anyone else. So, if you would love to be part of this cozy autumnal adventure, click the link in the show notes and join the rest of our bookish friends on the street team, or visit bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. That's bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. Thank you so much for your incredible support and enthusiasm. I'm truly grateful for you, and I can't wait to see you on the team. Hey there, listeners. Before we dive back into today's episode, I want to take a quick moment to talk about something really important. Reviews are the lifeblood of any podcast. They not only let us know what you're loving about the show, but also help others discover the beauty of living, giving, and repeating. So, if you're enjoying the content we're putting out, here's a small favor I'd love to ask. Could you take just a minute or two to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform? Whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform you listen on, your reviews make a world of difference. By leaving a review, you're not just sharing your thoughts with us, but you're also helping us climb the charts and reach more listeners who might benefit from our discussions. Plus, it's a wonderful way to show your support for the content you love. So, friends, if you're finding value, inspiration, or even just a good laugh in any of these episodes, please consider dropping a review. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. And hey, if you want to go the extra mile, share the podcast with your friends, family, or anyone you think would benefit from these conversations. Together, we can create a community of listeners who are engaged, inspired, and ready to take on the world. All right, that's enough from me. Let's get back to the show. Thanks for being the wonderful, lovely, incredible listeners you are. And as always, enjoy the episode.
Yeah, and I want to jump on that perfectionism topic because, you know, I like I struggle going through the loop of like when is the book going to be done? It's like it'll be done when it's perfect, but what
Mm-hmm.
I realized through trial and error is that my book will never be perfect. There are some things that I still want to change about my book even now that it's published, but you're never going to have a perfect book, but you can create a book that is ready to be published.
Mm-hmm.
Like an imperfect book that is finished is better than a perfect book that's never written.
Yeah.
So, some advice for people listening out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I should title this like trial and error. The the times that this has been mentioned, like the whole trial and error thing,
I
because
got
that's
it, like,
really writing is trial and error. At times,
trial and
it's just
error. Oh my gosh, a story of perseverance and frustration.
exactly. Yes. Oh,
Oh,
totally. Yeah.
that's so true.
So, yeah. So the final questions that we ask every guest who comes onto the podcast, I'm really excited to ask these because I just love hearing what people love to do to fill themselves up, to just feel joy in their lives, but also to give out to other people and to just create beautiful habits that allow them to consistently be able to fill themselves up, but also give out to others and create this just a balanced lifestyle. I would love to hear your thoughts. What are some of your ways, your favorite ways to live? So, some activities that just make you feel glad to be alive.
You want to learn about my hobbies and personal life, huh? Okay, I'll tell you. Yeah, like there's some things that I like to do to like keep a balanced lifestyle. Like one of the things is like physical activity. So like working out is one thing, but I like to work out in a little different ways. Like I like to like do jujitsu, so like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like study the martial art on that a little bit. I'm still a white belt, so don't feel too intimidated by me. Um, but that's a good way to balance just having a healthy lifestyle and combining the physical while you're sitting down writing for 7 to 8 hours a day. Another thing that helps me a lot is having a daily quiet time and prayer.
Mhm.
Just sitting down with God in the morning, just opening up my heart to Him and reading the Bible. It helps me stay connected to Him, but it also helps decrease the amount of anxiety that I feel every day because when I started
Mhm.
having more quiet times, my anxiety levels started going down. And,
Right.
sometimes there are days when I don't feel worried at all about anything. And I'm like, whoa. So this is what
Yeah.
Jesus tells us when he says not to worry. Like it's so liberating like that. And prayer is
Absolutely.
another like important factor in that because it keeps you connected to God and it like slows you down. You like your
Mhm.
mind is always going so fast, spinning so fast, but prayer like steadies you and calms you and you're like, okay, the world is still spinning. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah,
And then
totally.
another of thing is like serving and volunteering. Like I try to volunteer at my church to help out and just, use my life to have an impact on the world.
I love that. Yeah. Honestly, I love how you pointed out, like, just doing physical activities in the real world,
Yes.
because it can be so easy to get trapped behind that desk and be like, "I'm writing, my brain is working." I used to do that when oh my word, when I was in high school. I used to do that all the time. I was like, "No, my brain's working. I'm the girl who writes. I think with my mind. I don't do physical exercise." But I'll tell you now that I'm not in high school and that I am not as um unintelligent as I used to be.
I love it.
Get
That was
out
funny.
there. No, seriously, I get out there. I try to do more physical activities out in the real world, walking outside, taking in some
Walks are
sun.
nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting some exercise in too, workout, it just helps even your brain. I think there was some kind of scientific research that they did on how walking outside and doing physically moving your body actually helps your brain be able to function better
Yeah,
because we were made to live in the real world. God made us to live in the real world. And even though we write and even though we do things with our mind, that still doesn't mean that we don't have a little body over here
yeah.
that still wants to be used as well. And I love also how you were talking about just prayer and having a quiet time. And that's so essential. I think in our noisy world, it is so essential to have a time where you have peace, where you're not listening to something constantly, where you're just there. You're able to listen to God's voice. You're able to slow yourself down, slow your thoughts, which can be just racing fast. Especially I feel like writers tend to have really loud minds. Um, no, seriously. But yeah,
Just
I think it's so essential to be able to have that quiet time and that prayer to have some communion with God.
my mind can literally melt itself down by just thinking too much. It's like having like multiple TVs on,
Yeah.
just playing different commercials, and you're just hearing all of it at the same time. I hope I didn't just paint myself in a poor light right there. I'm not crazy. I'm normal.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hey, most of us have really crazy minds, and I think that's part of being creative, but I think also in a way it's kind of like the whole pitfall of just being overly creative and you kind of drown yourself out and you spin yourself out.
Yeah, and like it's one of the important things about being physical, but also just getting out into the world and not focusing on writing 100% of the time because that's actually
Mhm.
where inspiration can come into play. You can go out to a coffee shop and be like, "Oh, what
Yes.
if I wrote like a scene about a coffee shop?" And that's when, the juices start to flow naturally instead of you always thinking, "Make something good, make something good." It's like, no, like
Exactly.
it's good to refresh your brain and to take breaks and to give yourself some me time and go enjoy life because the more experiences you get, the better writing you can do too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I was actually watching yesterday, I think. I was watching an author. They have these writing routines where people recreate writing routines of famous authors.
Oh
And
yeah.
this girl was like walking through, was doing for a whole week a writing routine by Charles Dickens, who wrote Oliver Twist. And his was actually kind of crazy because he would walk outside. So he would write from 9 a.m. until 12. It's kind of interesting because I did not know until I saw this yesterday. He would put himself into like a trance-like state to be able to write. And then he'd come out at 12, he'd eat a quick lunch, and then he'd walk outside from 2 to 5 or something like that, just walking around London and just for 3 hours. So and we think we're like, "Okay, these guys used to coop themselves up in a room and just keep writing." No, these people used to take long walks, and that is how they got their inspiration for their works. So,
Yeah.
I really think that we sometimes cage ourselves in when we think, "Oh, we've gotta think of a great idea." No, there are so many ideas out there. Just get out into the world, do something new, do something fun, even do something
Yeah.
crazy that you're like, "Wow, I've always wanted to do this." You never know. There may be a story behind
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like we should all go on a walk.
exactly, yes. Yeah, I'd love to hear. I think you mentioned a little bit about this one though already. What are some of your favorite ways to give? So ways that you love to bless and fill others. I know you mentioned serving and things like that, but I'd love to hear a little bit more from that.
Yeah, like ever since COVID, actually, um, that was when I truly started serving and trying to help out in the community a little bit. I mean, COVID was a rough time for everybody, but that was really what got me out there to start volunteering more at church. And like my
Mhm.
church Saddleback, they were doing more food pantries at the time, and so that's when I started helping out more at those, and that's when I really started to learn like learn more that life is not about me
Mhm.
and that we should use our lives to benefit others, not just to benefit ourselves. So I always try to help out in some way around my church. So these days, that's usually me helping, working on the camera crew, videotaping our services so that we can post them online so that people can watch them. And I like doing that because I'm being part of a process that is truly helping people. And that's
Mhm.
when I truly feel that my life is making a difference and is being used for what it was meant to do.
Mhm.
And I remember those moments more than just, "Oh, what did I have for breakfast this morning?" Or, "Oh, I love that movie." It's like, no, I remember helping people more when I look back at my life. So I try to look for some opportunity to help people and just make the community a little better and just use my life to benefit others.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like so many times when we focus just on filling ourselves up, we lose out on half the joy of living
Yeah.
because half the joy is gained in helping other people and
Yeah.
just giving out to others. And I think that's really where we find the most fulfillment when we're able to fill ourselves up and then give out to others out of the joy that we've been filled up with, out of the energy that we've been filled up with. I think that is really one of the most rewarding things you can do in life, and it just makes you feel like, "Wow, this is what I was born to do."
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, Mark 10, verse 45 says, even Jesus came not to be served, but to
Mhm.
serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And that's what life is all about. It's about loving others, about loving God. And, God shows his love through those acts of service. Faith without good works is dead. So it's important that we do show love to others, by intentionally acting on that love, like reaching out to people. Like
Mhm.
send a friend a text message saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
you're going to do great today," because you have no idea what that person is really going through. And they could be having a really hard day. So just a simple act of kindness can change somebody's whole world. And that, translate back to what I wrote in my book, essentially. Small
Yeah.
acts of kindness make the biggest differences to people. And that's what I want to challenge people with this novel that I wrote is when was the last time that you texted your mom saying, "Hey, I love you, mom. Thanks for being my mom."
Yeah, exactly. And it's small things, but sometimes the small things are the things that mean the most and that stick with you the most. It's not the grand
Yeah.
gestures. It's those little moments where you get something and you're like, "Wow, somebody actually like took the time out of their day to
Yeah.
think about me." Like it's just
Yeah.
rewarding and refreshing and beautiful to know that somebody cares. And I
Yeah.
think that's at the deepest human level, that's what we all want. We just want to know that we matter. And just giving is just a way to find um just fulfillment in that and just being able to bless other people and remind them that they are loved, that they are cared for, and that they matter.
Yeah, and it's important that we, sometimes pause as we're in the middle of our work day or school day and look
Mhm.
around at who's around us right now. Like is anybody hurting around you because you don't know if anybody's hurting. So it's always good to check in on people and just see how they're doing because that is loving on them. That is giving them
Mhm.
attention and God wants us to love unto other people. So it's small things like that, like you said, that make the biggest difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear what are some of your favorite ways to repeat? So, what are some habits that you've implemented or are implementing to help you be able to create a balanced lifestyle?
Yeah, just like I said, like mentioned earlier, like just text a person every now and then, just say, "Hey, you're gonna
Mhm.
do great today," and having a balanced lifestyle, like you got to do some things that you love to do. Like I love to
Mhm.
go surfing on the weekends or just go exploring and have fun with friends. Like you got to do the things that you love because if you don't have a balanced life, it affects your work life as well.
Mhm.
And that'll affect my writing essentially. So having a solid community, I get a lot of my community from my church and from my friends. So like having a solid community, like investing time into people, because that's what life is
Mhm.
about. It's about being with people and, loving on them the way you want to be loved. So, yeah, and you gotta like love the things that you like too. Like enjoy the hobbies. Like go and enjoy life. Really
Mhm.
enjoy yourself. Like kind of like buy that ice cream because it's Saturday. It's your cheat day. You're like, all right, it's Saturday.
Yeah.
Go laugh with someone. Have a good time. Go on a podcast and talk with Shira Rodriguez about how awesome she is. I'm totally
Oh,
buttering
you're
you up.
sweet. Thanks. You're sweet.
No, I'm all
But
right.
yeah. But yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's also an intentional decision to just enjoy life and to put people as a priority as well, because
Yeah,
it's really not going to happen by itself. You've got to decide to say, okay, this time I'm dedicated to family, to friends. It's great that we accomplish things, but at the end of the day, we're gonna remember the relationships we had, the friends we had, the moments we made, the things we experienced. At the end of the day, that is what is going to be remembered.
yeah,
And the things that you said to somebody that maybe it was just saying something nice and it was something really easy for you to say, but maybe it made somebody's day. Just
yeah,
making that intentional habit of putting people first is really priceless. I love that.
yeah. You say it, man. Yeah, it's important to love on others and just to pay attention and slow down.
Mhm.
Look up from the phone.
Yes, thank you. Okay, that should have been said before on the podcast, and I don't know why it has not. Well, I feel like maybe somebody said something about, like, limiting time on the phone, but yes, please look up from the phone, if only to cross the street, and I've been caught doing this myself, so I get it. It is very tempting. We have a little
Guilty.
device. Exactly, but please, there is a life outside of our darling little phones. Yeah, so I would love to hear, where can our guests find you or get in touch with you? What's the best way to just find you on the internet or
Yeah, you can find me on like either like TikTok or Instagram. Like I use the same tag name, which is at author Jake Lynch. It's Lynch for reference. I also have a website, so literally just type in authorjakelynch.com and you'll see my website on there, and you can find me there. So yeah, just shoot me a message on social media, and I'll try and get right back out to you guys. My book, Broken and Beautiful, is on Amazon, so you can just type in the title and you'll find it there. Look for the picture of the broken butterfly. And yeah, the audiobook is coming soon as well.
sweet? I love that. All right. Well, thank you so, so much, Jake, for coming on the podcast. This has been a blast. Thank
Uh,
you.
Thank you so much for having me, Shira. You're a wonderful podcast host.
Thank you. All right. Well, you have
Yeah,
a wonderful day.
you as well.
My goodness. That was such a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed listening to that again so much. And truly, I think there was just so much wisdom in what Jake was saying and sharing about just embracing the writing process, embracing the fact that it doesn't have to be perfect and that you can learn through it. And I love his attitude too, that even though he wishes that he could go back and fix those mistakes, he's learned to bring out the best of it and realized how much benefit this might be to other writers, which I was just so grateful that he took the time to come onto the podcast and share some of his own insights on the podcast for you guys. And honestly, for me, because I always learn from all my guests. Truly, I learn so, so much. I feel like out of everybody, I'm the one that learns the most and gleans the most out of these episodes, more than anything else, just because I get to listen to them over and over as I'm recording, as I, interview them, as I do the pre-call, because I usually do a pre-call before. And so it's just so rewarding to see and hear the beautiful stories and just get to see everyone's hearts. It's beautiful. I'm so grateful that I get to do this. It's such a blessing that I get to be able to meet all these people and yeah, meet you guys too, and be able to just be a storyteller, even in this medium, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, also something that I loved, and I know I already talked about this in the call, but I love how he talked about actually looking people in the face and, you know, setting aside our phones for a little bit, or even just taking the time to text someone just to make people feel loved. I truly loved being able to hear that, especially from a male perspective, which I think is sorely wanted nowadays. And I know I keep ranting about how male perspectives and male authors are harder to find and everything, but truly I have gleaned so much. And I wish we as women would be more willing to listen to men share their hearts on these topics, because it's sorely needed. And honestly, in these last few episodes of just inviting guys, I have found so much wisdom in their advice, in their thoughts, and just a completely new way of seeing the world. And hopefully a wiser, better way of seeing the world. So definitely, I also loved just realizing as I was talking how much our phones influence our lives, how much social media, how much our minds are sometimes elsewhere when we literally forget how much is right in front of us. We forget to take walks. We forget that inspiration is right outside the door sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta see a leaf falling to trigger a new idea. But we're not going to see the leaf falling if we're not outside. And so, yeah, it was just so inspiring and beautiful to be able to share thoughts with Jake. And it was just such a privilege to have him on the podcast. Definitely tune in next time for another episode. And I'm so excited and thrilled to share what I've got planned with you guys. So definitely tune in next week for another episode. And until next time, continue to live, give, and repeat. And I'll see you next week. Yay! You did it! I'm giving you a lovely big virtual hug because you just finished another episode of Her Reading Life podcast. If you'd like to access all the wonderful links I mentioned in this episode, visit my website at bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. That's bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. There you can access my blog posts, resources, and so much more. Also, check out my Instagram page for more inspirational content and join my email list for insider secrets and exclusive updates on special events. The links are in the description box below. Also, if you could take a minute and leave a review for this podcast, that would be amazing. We're able to reach so many more people because of your reviews and ratings. I can't wait to chat with you next time, friends. Keep living, giving, and repeating.